Welcome to the BLTnT podcast. I'm your host, Matt Loria, serving up real stories of business, life, technology, and transformations. You'll hear from interesting people about big changes from career shifts to life-altering decisions and the innovations that help make it all happen. It's about sharing those light bulb moments, pivot points, challenges overcome, and the journeys that inspire us to think differently. If you're on the lookout for insights to propel you forward, stories that resonate, or just a bit of inspiration on your next BLTnT move, you're in the right place. Let's dig in. Hello and welcome to another episode of the BLTnT podcast. I'm here with Jeff Simek from RCO Engineering and Aerospace.
How you doing?
Thank
you, Matt.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Jeff's the general manager and has really been assisting your company from going from auto to aero. Has been the major transition you've been working on for some time here.
Yeah, so the company was started in 1973. And ultimately, from 1973 till about 2008, when I started working at RCO, it's primarily a product development partner. Ultimately, we're a gap filler, catalyst to getting products to market. OEMs would call, tier ones would call to get assistance, and we're essentially skill trades on steroids. Ultimately,
Right.
with a bunch of different assets that can bring lots of things to market, and eventually, what had happened, so in 2008, we ended up, the idea was diversify to go from prototype to production. And not too far into that diversification, we also decided to become an aerospace OEM, which is a super heavy diversification. And so, yeah.
Change after change.
And it's been a long learning curve, but a good one. And it's very interesting. Obviously, aerospace has a bit of sexy appeal to it, but at the end of the day, when you're done, hanging your hat, to go home, it's a hefty job.
Yeah. And is the company still into prototyping?
Yep.
Still into production?
Still into automotive production.
Automotive, right?
Yep. And about near half of our business now is aerospace OEM.
Okay, so you've met the mission of the diversification.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we're early on in the. So we're 15 years old, and I always tell everyone, hey, we might get our driver's license next year in the world of aerospace. We haven't seen the full life cycle yet, right? These life cycles in aero are, 30, 40 years long, and we're 15 years into it. So,
and what was the typical in automotive? Is that a 10-year max?
Yeah, it's 3 to 5 years of production, 10 years of service, and the service isn't really that difficult to manage. Mm-hmm. And you also have to think we're in aerospace we're an OEM, so we're not even a tier one. We're the OEM. These seats go onto aircraft. They have VIN numbers on them. We're like a mini Whirlpool. We own the spares, the warranty, all the service work around the world. So, if you're a tier one in the auto industry, you might not own warranty, or you may, but at the end, you're still supplying parts for maybe 10 years after.
Sure.
Production, but it's at a very low pace.
And let's explain to people what you're doing. You had a really great way of explaining this to me. Is that essentially people were driving up to their private jets in their Bentley?
Oh yeah,
and sitting in a nice cushy seat, and then they'd get on their private jet, and it wouldn't be as desirable of an experience. And so that market was pushing for kind of upclassing the seating, correct?
Well, yes, and ultimately automotive, they bring things to market very quickly, right? A lot of technologies come through automotive. It's a self-certifying industry, right? So they don't have a lot of they have regulation, but not heavy aerospace regulation.
Sure.
And the reality is that the prior seating suppliers before RCO entered the market were essentially bending aluminum and pop riveting it together and pulling aerospace grade actuation devices and mechanical stuff off the shelf that were out there. But, if you're a designer and you have to choose from a narrow window of, products to build this, seat, you ultimately are constrained. And, so yes, aerospace did come to Detroit. They went to all the major tier one automotive seating suppliers. Mm-hmm. No one wanted the business. They recognized that it was a big diversification. They probably would need a heavyweight team like we put together.
But was it also they kind of said no because of the quantity too,
yeah,
right?
quantity, volume is key.
Okay.
Yeah. volume's definitely key, but thinking about how do you disrupt your business with a aerospace segment in a big automotive tier one. I mean, I imagine that, ultimately I wasn't there when they were
And they're all
saying
saying, no,
no.
get out of here, we don't want
But
you.
they ended up landing, they ended up calling one of the tier ones called one of our sales guys, and it just sort of unraveled from there, But the reality is we got into this business not knowing regulation. And, in automotive, the OEMs pretty much hold all the regulation. They have standard specifications that meet all the NTSB, regulations that are flowed down from the federal government and wherever else regulations are coming from. And in the world of aerospace, it's not only the OEM that we're supplying to, such as Gulfstream being one of our biggest customers, it's also the FAA. They have regulation they flow down. So we answer to really two customers.
Two masters,
the FAA and Gulfstream. So.
Okay. And I just thought it was interesting how you said that this was it was kind of an accidental endeavor or industry that you kind of flew into.
Yeah.
There you go.
Good way.
That you guys weren't really seeking this out. You were seeking diversification, but you didn't seek out the aerospace space in particular.
No, we hadn't really. I mean, we maybe a little bit, we were doing mock-ups and things for the aerospace industry. However, we weren't AS 9100 certified, which is the regulation required to, produce, OEM grade parts for the aero industry.
Is that an ISO?
Yeah, it's
regulation?
an ISO based.
Okay.
It's kind of like IATF 19649 for automotive.
Okay.
And it's very similar, actually. So, yeah.
Great. So I know when we were talking about this and you were telling me the story, and I said, we got to have you on this podcast, you said there was a lot of risk and a lot of reward kind of measurements going into all this of delving into Gulfstream and delving into aerospace. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I think the reality is I don't know that we understood all the risk. We didn't. From a contractual perspective, we signed a 40-page document, and I was actually came in and read the document. I'm like, wait a minute, we need a repair station. What is that? FR 145 repair station. We literally would sit in meetings, and I run meetings on a one-pager, and I had my administrative assistant put all the acronyms on the flip side, and quietly everyone would go flip the page over, and we'd look FR 145. Oh, that's a repair station, kind of like a
mechanic shop.
A mechanic shop for cars. And we're like, oh, okay. But, so we had to spool that up. And, so we went, searching for someone that had run an FR 145 in the past.
Okay.
We got lucky. We found somebody that, great guy, still with us today, and is leading our service business. But we found him because Spirit Airlines was moving all their maintenance to Costa Rica, and he didn't want to move to Costa Rica.
Okay.
He's like, hey, I'm looking for a job. And I'm like, you know anything about passenger seating? He's like, well, we take him off the plane, we put him back on. And I'm like, okay, yeah, come on. And so he turned out to be a great hire. But, you have to use your network. And every little bit of it, even if you don't have access to the whole network, you're finding folks that,
maybe a little bit more subject matter expert than you at the time on the individual pieces.
Yeah, so there was risk. I mean, so the other side of it is that when you're building a custom product, everything's custom. I mean, we are literally, and I'm not saying this to exaggerate. We are building the Ferrari of seating. These are the most expensive seats in the world, essentially, single passenger seats, and they're highly mechanical, highly over-engineered. They do everything for the client that are, the end customer. And so, we have a lot of custom grade materials. Every component that goes into these seats are custom. So, that becomes a risk, right? Relative to, say you're using carbon fiber and the tow company that you certified to decides they want to go make windmills and they're done. And little old RCO's sitting there going, well, wait a minute, we certified our entire platform of seats on your grade of carbon. And they're like, well, we're sorry. And so the next thing you know, you're out chasing down another grade and have to go back to the sled testing and go back to the dynamic testing. And, and those are big bills that you didn't plan for. So there's risk like that. There's, risk in probably the economy. But
Sure.
I'll tell you, like we were talking, RCO diversified into aerospace. Okay, great. Not only did we diversify into aerospace, we're not tier one, we're an OEM. So that wasn't, it's not like we were building to print and diversifying. We went right into, just jumped right in completely.
Yeah, whole hog.
And we own the designs, the specs, the spec development, all of that. Just like,
amazing.
we're like a little GM in that scenario.
How did the culture of the organization shift? Obviously, not just from auto to aero, but you had all of these other kind of responsibilities coming into place. So how was culture impacted during this time?
It's still being impacted today,
Okay.
15 years later.
Is there an us versus them type of thing?
No.
The auto guys versus the aeros?
No,
or-
that's less and less. But that was in the beginning.
Okay.
So, you have, as a company, you have resources, processes, and values that are all at the foundation of what your offering is, right? And all of a sudden you say, well, okay, guys, we're going to go take on this aerospace work. Well, in the beginning, it's still 90% auto, the stuff that's coming through, and they're paying customers, and we know who they are. We don't have a lot of sales activity to go get the work, and so your resources are like, oh, yeah, that's fine. That's aerospace, but we got this automotive
And this is
work
what pays the bills right
and this
now,
is
too,
what,
right?
yeah, paying the bills. And, you got, and then processes, as you can imagine, there's, in a low volume environment, the processes that you put into place are probably more tied to humans than they are robots, especially with a custom product. Like, we have a couple hundred configurations of seating that are involved, and they're significant configurations. You don't put these together with robots, but in the end, there's a lot of process, from A to Z, finance to sales, that have to be converted toward, the aerospace. And I say sales only because of contract development, and the reality is, to get a brand new platform for seating isn't something like, you're working on it for a few months and you get the job and you move on. You're working on this stuff for years,
Yeah.
so it's a different mindset shift for.
You kind of mentioned that to me where you said, look, in automotive, if we sign a bad contract, we're in for 4 or 5 years. If
Yeah.
we sign a bad contract in aero,
You're in it
we're
for
in
40 years.
Yeah, for some time.
Yeah, you're in it for the full life cycle, especially if you're an OEM. Again, and for the audience listening in, I mean, if you're diversifying into aerospace as a tier 1 build to print or a tier 2 build to print, the contracts are a lot less risky. But when you get in as an OEM, you're definitely in for the long haul. And the reality is we own the engineering. We have to keep the engineering alive as long as the plane's alive. Until 5 aircraft that's left in existence. And if you can imagine being on Gulfstream platforms, you see a lot of old Gulfstreams
sure
out there.
do.
And you go over to Pontiac,
Yep.
there's some 1980s sitting out there.
Harbor Springs, 4th of July weekend, you see a lot of Gulfstreams.
Yeah, and so we own ensuring that the seats are airworthy. Ultimately we don't have to pay we get paid to do that, but we have to keep the engineering alive. For the lifetime of the aircraft, so that these things
Until
are
5 are left in existence.
yeah. Now that's a contract scenario that we
Okay.
have with different customers, but
Okay.
the reality is that's not necessarily the FAA saying that, but
Interesting. So, did you guys fund this whole endeavor internally, or did you
well the
have
first
to go outside for funding to do this?
No, we did heavily funded it internally.
Okay.
There was a lot of risk. And the ownership played the risk chips on that.
Sure.
And they did really well with it. So yeah. But the customer does, depending on, they also input funding as well, depending on how much of it they own and that
Got
type
it.
of thing.
Got
It
it.
just depends. That's really actually a very good contractual discussion for anyone entering the market is, ultimately who's paying and how much of the intellectual property is owned in the end.
And on an OEM seat, what would you say the percentage is of the IP that you guys own versus?
It's more of a 50-50 for pretty much just across the board, everything we do.
Okay, got it. What were some of the trials and tribulations of the whole process here?
Well, some of the first tribulations were
It's like on the development side of things.
on the development side. We were probably 3 months before we were going to ship our first ship set. And we had 6 or 7 ship sets of seats, and a ship set of seats is anywhere from 10 to 14 seats.
Okay.
And depending on the cabin layouts and whatnot. And so we're piecing this thing together. And I remember thinking, well, geez, we got to go hire some aerospace engineers. And so we started looking around in Detroit, and it's not like, again, we were building this seat like we're in our parents' basement. We didn't know what aerospace was going on. And so we ended up having to, learn for ourselves what network we could find. And we hired an aerospace engineer, the quality engineer. And he came into my office one day, and he's like, hey, we usually get an order for each project. In this case, it would have been a ship set. Mm-hmm. And we just order all our fasteners from mill standard fasteners or NAS fasteners, which is kind of tied to the aerospace industry. Mm-hmm. I said, oh, he said, but all these ones here, they're all automotive. I don't know if if they're going to pass conformity with the FAA. And I was like, okay, all right. Well, this is how we do business, bud. We got these automotive fasteners here. We're fine. I'm not kidding you. It wasn't a month later, and the FAA came through the door, and they started messing around and ultimately came into my office declaring that we have an issue with these fasteners.
These are not fine.
And I was like, uh-oh. So ultimately, we ended up doing, we threw everything in the kitchen sink at it and essentially bought an Instron tensile test machine, called the Instron company. They're like, hey, we haven't made these fixtures in 40 years. Like, what are you guys doing, Mm-hmm. And we're like, no, we need them, And we started testing fasteners. And the reality is that, it was something like 7 fasteners that had failed, so we come
you
up
said
with
like out of 200, right? So
yeah,
it's a very small percentage.
Yeah, and it was, so we had to develop a project with the FAA, and, mm-hmm. and they, we agreed to do certain levels of testing on these fasteners. And what's interesting is we had hardly any mill or NAS spec fasteners in these seats. Mm. And the reality is that the design engineers, that would have been another constraint for them. And they had 0 constraints when they went after designing these seats. And so really when you think about our competitors, people would come and say, well, the competitor might, could take this business. I'm like, no, they can't. They will never touch this business because they, or at least the design, I should say, mm-hmm. Because they wouldn't get out of that far out of their risk zone.
Meaning that they wouldn't go out of their way to leverage a new fastener versus they would just be using the pre-certified fastener where you guys are certifying your own fasteners and saying, okay, now we can use these in the design which we already have on the shelf.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is we now have a whole slew of fasteners we can use, which, that wouldn't have happened had we, walked into this, not understanding regulation. So in any event,
meaning if you would have understood almost what you didn't know is actually what helped you.
Yes, no, thank you.
What you don't know can hurt you. In this case, what you don't know actually helps you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right.
So that was like an early scenario, but we've had lots of challenges that we've overcome as a result of not knowing.
Sure. And now you're the experts, right? You're the 15, 16-year-old novice driver at this point.
Yeah, but I think we're gritty enough. We have talent. We're gritty. We can certify things. We've certified a lot of stuff that hadn't been in the hands of the FAA in the past. So mm-hmm. You have to open up a special project if you're bringing a new raw material into the market. So I feel like the company has the ability and the strength and the exercise of bringing new things to market and certifying them.
Well, you had said we're very much vertically and horizontally integrated. Yeah. Right. And from what I'm hearing is you're really doing a lot of insourcing. You try not to look to the outside. Was that born out of we're in the prototype business, therefore we know we have to kind of make tools, build parts, things that don't exist, and we have to be real gritty and and kind of self-manufacturing of so
Yeah.
many things already.
Yeah,
So
and-
that kind of that genesis of that attitude is what's carrying through a bit.
Yeah, if you think about the market we were in prototype, a lot of it involves seeds. So we manufacture foam. We pour it. We also mill it. We manufacture sheet metal. Think about a sheet metal frame and a seat. And we can do lots of cool things in the sheet metal, lasers and all sorts of cool CNC bending and all that stuff. So we've grown since the 70s in terms of we have really nice assets on ground. Plastics injection molding, obviously that's a big piece of seating. We have a trim department that does ultimately cut and sew activity, but we don't do a lot of production there. We just do a lot of development work for the OEMs. What else? We had a foundry. We big into additive. We have additive manufacturing plant. We have an interior exterior like super low volume custom paint scenario. We have a landing zone where we bring customers in. That's still prototype a lot where we can section off areas of the company or section off areas of that building so that it's secure and private. And you'll see in one area we're building autonomous cars for integrating the technology into autonomous cars. Obviously, in one area of the company, this is all on campus, right? So when we talk about the horizontal, we have a lot of manufacturing capabilities that were born in prototype that were converted into automotive production and are also now converted into aerospace serial production, low volume. There's not many companies you run across that are IATF 19649 and AS 9100, and that's across the board, across all of our factories.
And what does the campus look like? What is the factory layout?
We have 11 or 12 buildings, 650,000 square feet. 12 in gross spec.
Okay. Anything out of the region or everything?
We just had an open house down in Savannah, Georgia. We have 5,000 square feet leased down there, and that's going to be a service center for seating.
Okay. Great.
We also have a test lab out in Plymouth, Michigan. It's a static environmental test lab that primarily supports the auto industry. However, we also do aerospace testing there.
Did you have to add a lot of square footage for when you added the aerospace in?
Yeah, we did buy a building, converted it. It's light industrial building, about 40,000 square feet. Okay. And that's where we build our seats and we house the OEM staff, if you will.
Got it. And how have you taken all of this to market? Now that you've matured, you've got this initial client, or I'm sure there's more than one. Client
we have more clients now. Yep.
And what's the go to market on that?
What do you mean by that?
Who are you seeking out?
Oh yeah, so we're looking at so for one, all of our plants are AS 9100, so they could do build to print for OEMs or large tier primes in aerospace. So we see growth there, and growth is happening there. In terms of passenger seating for the business jet world, we are branching out. We do have some small contracts that we're working on right now. The Gulfstream is continuing to grow as well. They're the kind of the biggest horse in the race when it comes to large cabin business jets. Okay. And if you follow General Dynamics, who owns Gulfstream, half the talk on the earnings calls is Gulfstream right now. And they have a lot of growth happening. If you think about it, we talked a little earlier, there's about 25,000 business jets.
Yeah, why don't we have Jackie, can you bring the sheet up that talks about those stats?
Yep, that's the one. So if you scroll down a little bit to the business jet outlook, there's 24,000 business jets globally. Yep, keep going down. About 700 delivered annually. I think it pushed 730 last year. Okay. And that's worth roughly $20 billion. And if you do a 20-year outlook, that's $500 billion. I'm not even putting inflation in there. I'm just throwing a quick number. And, of the 700 business jets produced a year, about 200 are large cabin, and we live in that space. Okay. Gulfstream lives in that space as well, and they own pretty much half the market share. So, we continue to grow with them.
Well, and I think when you're talking about industry, and we're always talking about in industry here in the Detroit area, is the diversification, right? So many people are worried about as EVs become more prolific, there's less parts, there's going to be less need for bodies and people, and we're going to need reskilling of people. Obviously, just reskilling of people just for the EV side of things from the internal combustion engine, but also people are looking for diversification. And so, you also threw up here on this stand here, the global outlook is right here. We're looking at, if you scroll up, Jackie, to the top.
Yeah, the commercial.
Just commercial outlook overall is a doubling industry over the next 20 years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you look to the right there, the regional highlights is really showing you where the growth is happening in passenger traffic, and that's really, that's the key indication for commercial jet manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
So today there's 25,000 jets in service globally, and they plan to produce in the next 20 years between Airbus, Boeing, 44,000 jets. And in the end, some of them are retiring, but in the end, we're growing from 25,000 jets in service today to 50,000 in service in 20 years from now.
Sure.
So, if you look at the value of those jets, it's worth over $6.5 trillion. And 65% of that is spent in the supply chain. And Boeing, Airbus, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, they're all spending money in Michigan. And we look at this and say, look, we don't need Boeing to come here and make plants or make planes in Michigan. We just need to brand Michigan and get more of the parts supply and the system supply.
Sure.
And we have quite a bit going on here in Michigan. That's maybe another little rabbit hole we can get into a little bit later. But the reality is, and you look at the revenue tied to this thing. So, we're entering our service. We're 15 years old, right? So we're starting to enter the service market where we're doing maintenance, repair, and overhaul of seating. Mm-hmm. And that is a lot of...
can we just explain that for people?
Yep.
There's seats that you built 15 years ago, right, that are now requiring service.
Yes.
Is the point.
And
that 40 years is the overall life cycle. So these seats could require multiple service points through the 40-year timeline.
Yep. And then in the commercial plane, they have what they call different checks. It's all regulated. So, they're checked annually, every 2 years, every 4 years, depending on what system needs to be checked. Or, essentially they'll end up doing a heavy check at some point, whether it's 9 years, 10 years, or 12 years for the first heavy check, where they completely strip out the interior, look for corrosion, rebuild the engines, all that. The engines are on their own, timeline. But,
sure.
These are major, these are $150 million, $200 million jets with $20 million piece engines on them. Mm-hmm. And some of those things obviously have large maintenance, repair, and overhaul revenue outlooks. And so they talk about that service model value up there at $4.4 trillion. So over the next 20 years, to keep the planes in service, there will be $4.4 trillion spent. Mm. That's not talking about the $6.5 trillion for the plane.
Correct.
Or for 20 years of planes.
So if you're advising the high school kid today, hey, what should I do when I grow up?
There's a lot of growth happening in aerospace, and I think I could advise the students, but I think the big thing for us right now is to advise the stakeholders of the state of Michigan to really sink their teeth in this and really peel this onion and understand what it is. And
sure.
We figure today there's about $8 billion of GDP leaving the state of Michigan.
Due to what factors?
Well, I'm $8 billion in GDP in aerospace for the state of Michigan.
Okay.
We're a $500 billion GDP state,
sure.
roughly. It's grown a little bit. A big chunk of that's in the retail of home loans and stuff like that, but there's also $100 billion, let's just say, in manufacturing. And say 70 to 80 billion of that is auto manufacturing. And we have 8 billion that we do in aerospace manufacturing.
Currently.
Yeah, currently. So, and that doesn't even include the tooling that's happening, tool manufacturing, which is hard to capture that kind of revenue stream.
But if we can just use maybe some really oversimplified math, if we know that the commercial market is doubling over the next 20 years, we could perhaps capture that here or a vast portion of it
Yeah.
with our manufacturing prowess.
Yeah, and so and we're doing that. We spooled up in 2017 the Aerospace Industry Association of Michigan.
Which you're involved.
Yeah,
you're
I'm
involved
on the board. I was a founding board member. I was probably the smaller company on the board. GE Aviation, Pratt Whitney, Eaton Aerospace,
Okay.
the University of Michigan are all on the board. There's a few small companies. Basically, from Jackson to Calumet and the UP, we have board members.
Okay, great. And we're going to include, I know, in our show notes and everything, we're going to make sure that folks know how to attend, because you've got an upcoming event here in Michigan
Yeah.
happening in September. But and this is an annual event?
Yeah, it's an annual event. This will be our third annual event. So this type of conference, it's I'll call it high end for lack of a better word, but we're bringing global stakeholders with the C-suite stakeholders from Boeing, Airbus, Lockheed Martin, Liebherr, Eaton. A lot of big names are coming.
Sure.
And ultimately, these types of conferences typically happen in Seattle, Montreal, Singapore, Los Angeles. No, we're bringing it to Rochester, Michigan, Royal Park Hotel. And, we, Bank of America, Industry Outlook, major players that are involved around the aerospace industry are coming here to talk about the industry. We're exposing Michigan's, strengths. So I think it's a real important event for people to attend that are interested in understanding and starting to want to put the pieces together on what's going on in the world of aerospace. The speakers are really good speakers, so they're good to listen to regardless of the content. But the content is really strong this year, and we're opening up with a talent panel.
Okay.
So I'll be moderating a panel. Dick DeVos is kicking it off because he was founder of the Western Aviation Academy, which is at the Gerald Ford Airport in Grand Rapids. And
that's actually a high school, correct?
Yeah, that's a
charter high school.
It's a charter public high school, yeah. And he is investing in it, right, because he sees the talent being an issue, right? And obviously I'm sure there's other things, legacy and stuff like that. But, so he's kicking it off. Obviously he's flying in for just a couple hours and taking off.
That's just to show his commitment to the aviation business.
Yeah,
though, right?
yeah.
He's not going to drive in for the aviation.
No, yeah. But, so we're doing a really cool talent panel that I think it's probably, I travel to a lot of conferences, and I've seen a lot of agendas. And this is going to be a really cool talent panel.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So we have the University of Michigan, a professor from the University of Michigan that's super dynamic. We have an F-16 fighter pilot, and myself are all leading panels of colleges and high schools and universities, and then we're even doing a student panel. But Dick's kicking it all off. So.
Okay.
And then we'll get into business. But talent is on everyone's mind.
Yeah.
It's the number one issue in aerospace, and it's the number one issue I'm sure you hear from folks that you bring in from industry.
Yeah, all the time. I mean, and we're just concerned about the talent pool leaving here. We'd rather be upskilling it and keeping it here.
Yeah.
So this episode of the BLTnT podcast is sponsored by Auxium, business IT and cybersecurity designed to outsmart chaos. And powered by Juniper Networks. Automate your network with Juniper Networks and the Mist AI platform, the world's first AI-driven wired and wireless network. We've really covered a lot of what I would, we do business, life, technology, and transformations here. So I think transformations, you've knocked it out of the park, right?
Yeah.
You check all the boxes there and talked a lot about business. Let's talk a little bit about let's talk about life a little bit here. We have kind of an interesting fact is that in that chair, well, actually in the chair we had two people in the room when we interviewed him, but you actually went to college with Tom Swartz, who's the CTO at Detroit Manufacturing Systems, who we interviewed just in a couple episodes ago.
Yeah. No, Tom and I have known each other since I would say the mid '90s.
Okay.
And he's a fraternity brother of mine at Ferris State University. He didn't go into plastics, but I was in the plastics engineering program.
Okay.
I think he was business. I actually forget, but nonetheless. So Tom and I we've always maintained friendship. I used to live in Royal Oak, And so he did as well, and so we'd always run into each other. And every once in a while,
that's
we'd
a
get
small
together.
world. It's a small BLTnT world.
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about growing up. You're a Michigan. You grew up in Michigan
Yep.
your whole life, and
Yep.
tell us a little bit about that.
I grew up in Michigan, at Clio, Michigan. My dad was an engineer for General Motors, final line manufacturing engineer. My mom she was stay at home. And I have two sisters, one older, one younger, and they both live up in Fenton. Actually, all the family lives up in Fenton. Grew up in a farming community.
Yep.
So my mom and dad, when they got out of the Navy, my dad was in the Navy. He never set foot on a boat, but he was an aircraft mechanic
Okay.
for the T-28 trainer. They had my sister, and they needed a home. And so my uncle gave them an acre lot, or sold them for very cheap, an acre lot on the farm. And so when I say I grew up on a farm, I did. It wasn't my parents, although we helped a lot. It was corn and soybeans, so I grew up in that environment. My dad was a big gearhead, so we were always rebuilding a Jeep or built a sandrail. Always doing something with a muscle car. So I was always out in the barn. I was an engineer when I was a little
From
kid.
a young age, huh?
From a young age, and obviously strong work ethic. My parents were both pretty busy people.
Okay.
So in fact, my dad today, we were up north last couple weekends ago and working on a project, and I'm aligning some stuff and drilling some holes. And he's like, give me that drill. And so he's still 77 years old, and he acts like he's 50. So
That's great.
But I look at him and I'm like, man, I wish I could slow down, but you're the reason I can't, and I never will.
Right.
I never will.
It's in your blood.
It's in your blood. And so, so I went to Ferris State University, left there, went to, I started working in the plastics engineering automotive. So
Okay.
ultimately I was working for a company called Key Plastics in Grand Rapids. That's where I learned all the manufacturing. I always tell kids that are in engineering, if you want to get into the business side of it, you need to get on the manufacturing floor.
Yes.
No one can ever take away those learnings from you. And I see a lot of people that are unsuccessful in their careers because they hadn't got that experience. Because ultimately, when you move forward in your career, you're more respected because you know what's happening out
Sure.
there, and you know what can happen, and you're listened to a lot better than if you just decide to go into just program management or just design engineering.
Yeah, true academia, or just academia into it versus getting the
money's made on the floor.
getting the floor
Yeah,
experience.
and you could start striking lines on it too, but every line you're striking is a potential cost. And ultimately, if you come from manufacturing and you start designing, I think your legs are, you're far in front of a lot of folks.
Sure.
But
Sure.
So I worked in the auto industry for probably 18 years before I went to RCO, which was also automotive before then I got into the
And what was your original role at RCO?
plant manager of the injection molding factory.
Okay.
Yeah, and the idea was to turn it from prototype to production, which we did. So we ended up, we didn't even have like a materials required planning system, MRP. We didn't have ERP. We had all these orders coming in from the customers, and we were like, everything was an Excel spreadsheet, and we had to have a contract service pull in the data, and it was pretty and we didn't have a lot of procedures about process monitoring, and you name the gamut.
How did the founders handle you coming in and saying and helping with that transition? I mean, again, the prototype world seems like very interesting. If you're an engineer, right, you get to build it, make it, think about it. Whereas when you're going into the production business, you've got to be efficient. You've got to have every process has to be lined up. How did they handle that? I mean, was it their idea to do that?
Yeah, it was their idea.
Then purposely bring you in to accommodate that to happen?
Yep. So it was their idea. They were seeing the writing on the wall relative to product development and prototype activity because the industry was getting smarter. Less and less prototypes were becoming a thing. So, a lot of the OEMs were doing pre-production tooling and skipping the prototype, and they would prototype off the production tools to save money. And then, of course, later on, in about that time, ultimately, additive manufacturing became a thing in the plastics world, and one big piece of our prototyping was plastics injection molding. And so we also invested in additive manufacturing. We have a sizable, quite a few machines that are running nonstop, making plastic components.
Do you do metal additive?
No.
Or just plastic?
No, just plastic.
Okay.
We've looked at metal. I'm sure it might come into place at some point in time, but the business case really didn't support us moving forward with it. So. Okay. Yeah.
What else do you think you want to talk about?
I think. I think the aerospace, the AeroOne conference at Royal Park Hotel, September 4th through 6th, is a great place for people to come learn the industry. I want to share learnings. I get up and speak at these conferences.
Yeah, I would say teaching seems to be kind of a thing.
Yeah, and so I like to. It's a place for at least me to give back and feel like. You can have an impact. And I think, everyone wants a diversified portfolio, right?
Sure.
In their 401k.
You bet.
The state needs one as well. And I think with some of the challenges going on in the auto industry right now, it's important for companies to not feel like the word aerospace is daunting. Like when you first think about, I want to get in the aerospace industry, it's a little scary. But the reality is, there's some mom and pop shops out there that are aerospace companies. It's not as scientific as you think, but there is a lot of regulation, and you have to sift through it and learn through it. And if you, I think, come to conferences like this, you begin to network and understand the industry, obviously the demand for aircraft, and this is just the commercial aircraft and business jet aircraft, but we have, demand for rockets, demand for satellites. Might have demand for mining equipment on Mars. I mean, who knows?
And defense aircraft.
Yeah, defense aircraft. This advanced air mobility thing. It has some business case challenges, but eventually it could flip to a positive business case. And advanced air mobility is really people or parcel, military or civil, rural or city. So when you look at potential package deliveries and things of that nature, maybe package deliveries in a rural community are going to be a thing. Obviously a electric drone can probably get from A to B quicker in a rural community. That's just Jeff's opinion of it.
Right.
But, that's out there in the future too. And those could have a high volume scenario. But there's a long road before that happens. Sure. I mean, right now, I keep circling back to the commercial jet, forecast.
Sure.
And that's really what pays all the bills in the aero industry.
Yeah. That's where all the real developments are happening, I would imagine, too, from the technology side of things.
Yeah, and it's critical infrastructure to the country. It's also in the top 10 global exports, right? So when we hear about Boeing having troubles, I mean, that's a real concern for the nation. But a lot of the tier ones and primes, they don't just supply to Boeing; they supply to Airbus and Embraer, and so they're supplying parts globally. They might make the planes here, but the parts are leaving. Aerospace is fragmented. It's it's very fragmented. Automotive. Typically you got an OEM plant producing Chevy pickups, and there's a supplier park, and everyone's aligned to standards and advanced product quality planning and all these systems. And I mean, when you stand back, and I've had moments in automotive like, oh my God, we have no idea what's going on in the industry. But when you stand back and look at automotive versus aerospace, automotive is just cadence, policy, procedure. In aerospace, it's regulation, heavy regulation. And, there's a lot of inefficiencies.
We did talk about that, though. The regulation, you're not seeing a ton of the regulation yet coming your way from the cybersecurity aspects of things.
Yeah, for RCO, we're talking about it in the boardroom, if you will. We when the stars align and we need to make it happen, we will.
Sure.
We have a level of security that I can't really speak to. Having you come look at it might be interesting. with the company you have, but we feel we're pretty safe at the moment. But if it's commanded that we need cybersecurity for handling defense data and things of that nature, we'll make it happen.
What did you think about the recent issue with the CrowdStrike and Delta and how much it impacted their airline in particular?
Yeah, it's you think about Delta and how big they are, and it's like, wait a minute. I mean, and they're often thought of as the premium aircraft or passenger carrier and passenger airline, and I was taken back a bit by that that they didn't have better controls in place.
Yeah.
And but again, it's not something I follow that often.
What struck me the most on it was that we call it in our world, we call it technology debt, right?
Yeah.
So when they complained to CrowdStrike and said, "Hey, CrowdStrike, this is on you," CrowdStrike pushed back and said, "Hey, you haven't updated your computers in forever. You're on antiquated equipment." We call that technology debt. So they were in deep technology debt, or at least that's what CrowdStrike is alleging. That made me step back a little bit and go, that's interesting to think that this premium brand isn't keeping up on some of the table stakes.
Yeah, and I think this could have some impact to the industry, right? A big company like Delta, you think about the impact to Boeing's mistakes that have been aired out everywhere, and
sure,
the Delta mistake here, and it does shape the industry, right? So
yeah, I was happy to know that. I mean, these were more on the booking side of things than the computers that are running the actual airplane themselves. But still, I mean, I never even thought about it until you brought it up here about it, the critical infrastructure piece of it, right? How that's considered, critical in nature, right?
Yeah,
it's not just necessarily just an inconvenience. It can be a security issue. It can be defense issue to be able to mobilize our people.
Yeah.
Where we need to move them.
Well, and I'll tell you, certainly. And then relative to critical infrastructure, I mean, the country, and I have evidence of this because I've been on some of the committees, but the country and the legislatures through, like, say, NASA or through Department of Transportation is out looking for where our gaps are. And so, like, I don't know if you heard about the Michigan Maritime manufacturing initiative that just happened. So
I haven't.
It actually didn't get a lot of news coverage. However, I was invited, and the top NASA or top Navy came, and Colonel and Governor Whitmer and Senator Peters, and they made a big announcement that the state of Michigan's getting money to develop a talent base so that we can make submarines here in the state of Michigan.
Okay.
So the first phase is really a talent development phase, and so they're asking the community colleges and others to step in and develop curriculum, and and a lot of it's really built around the trades, like the welding, the machining, and the things of that nature. So it's kind of agnostic. Some of the stuff that they're doing could feed other industries as well. But so that was some good news that the state of Michigan could be a player in the defense in submarines.
And it makes sense, right? I mean, if we're known as the transportation folks, I mean, maybe that's the change in branding here, from automotive to full-on transportation, whether it's in the air or in the sea.
Yeah, and I don't think we brand ourselves. I look at a lot of people are, heads of companies are really concerned about talent. I mean, they wake up at night, and this is a significant issue for them. And it has been for a while, and COVID just exaggerated it, but it really came to light during COVID, and this problem's not going away,
And we oversimplified it when we were talking a little bit before, is just more people are retiring than people are coming into the talent pool in those skilled trades to help us manufacture these items.
Yeah, and I would say we as a state can argue that we have the highest concentration of skilled trades in the country.
I would imagine so.
And, yes, they are retiring, but you know what? What are we doing about it? We have a base. We have a mentor base. I'm on the board of First Robotics, which is the K-12 STEM platform. And I'm always amazed at all the mentors, and they're typically folks that are near retirement that are working with these students and teaching them everything they got, building this robot and bringing it to market. And I look at that and I'm like, wow, why can't we do something like that? But take those, near retirement folks and give them an incentive to get back into the education
Absolutely.
and help. I think the biggest issue you have is someone needs to release, the requirements to be a teacher, and I see it
Sure.
happen in FIRST Robotics. And there's no requirement here. These kids are just learning from these people.
And this is a
immediately,
quote unquote unqualified teacher.
Yeah.
Right, in terms of they're not credentialed as a
Yeah.
teacher, I should say. These kids are learning a lot from those folks.
But I'll tell you, like I said earlier, Boeing and Lockheed and SpaceX, they're all spending money here in the state of Michigan. And they're all running ads trying to get our talent. But at the end of the day, they're still spending money here because you know what? We do have the trades. And I think we need to brand that as a state. I really do. I think we need to come up with, let's brand ourselves that. Let's call ourselves that. Because when you call yourself something, eventually you're going to be that somebody.
You name it and claim it.
Yeah, and I think there's a real chance that skilled trades can come back alive, and I think Michigan can be a bright spot there.
Great. Let's talk on the little bit of a risk of the manufacturing sides of things. I have heard that there's from a supply chain issue and a security issue kind of together here, is that we do have some small and mid-sized organizations that are very key. They might be making a bolt or something on that airplane or on that, or maybe not necessarily a commercial. Let's use a defense contractor. Somebody's making a bolt for that, and a foreign entity comes in and buys the company.
Yeah.
Right. And all of a sudden, now that's let's use China as the example. Right. That's a Chinese owned company now, and if we go to war, all of a sudden they get the call from the mothership that says, okay, shut down operations. And all of a sudden we can't build jets because of that fastener, that bolt, something that's going into that. What are you seeing about that?
Yeah, I haven't ran into that. Honestly, I get that's something that could be real. I hate to say I have faith in the folks that are monitoring this, from DC, but I definitely, I think we do need to secure that. And, but I haven't followed too many stories where
and
that's popped up.
You haven't been seeing it in your world where these three suppliers have been gobbled up by.
No, what's interesting is, RCO has internal suppliers, right? For our passenger seating. We also groomed probably another 60 suppliers that are local here in the state of Michigan. So that's the other interesting thing. So RCO becomes this OEM, right? And, the growth over the last 15 years has been really good in terms of, we're on over 900 aircraft flying around the globe today.
Wow.
So, and just imagine 10 seats in each one of them
Sure.
on average. And, that just didn't happen. All of RCO didn't, we had to have a supply chain. And, we picked we found some really good suppliers, and they came along with us in the journey. And some of those suppliers are now AS9100.
Wow.
So we kept the supply chain local for the most part. We do have some unique things that we buy in France and, some one-off stuff from England. And, but, we had to go there because they had the technology and we needed it quickly. And, that's,
Sure.
how it goes. But for everything that, a lot of machine goods, cables, you name it, we buy it from the outside, and we've grown a supply chain.
You buy it locally for the most part.
Yeah, here in Michigan.
That's great. Was that purposeful?
It was, like I said, we were living in a basement when we were developing this thing.
Yeah.
Your parents' basement. You're like, oh, you come up every day and be like, all right, who could supply that? You look out the window and you're like,
Yeah.
we, it took a bit to build a network, and the aerospace industry actually. One benefit of joining that as a founding board member is I brought a few folks, key stakeholders from the company to go to a lot of the events, and we found suppliers through attending a luncheon.
That's great.
And started expanding, and then obviously I started learning from the other board members what's happening, because they're legitimately in aerospace. I mean, GE Aerospace, and Eaton Aerospace, and University of Michigan. These people are, they know everyone in aerospace. And so it was kind of a good thing, because I was probably one of the more active board members because I had so much to learn. You know, the board member from Eaton Aerospace, okay, well, you know, he's in aerospace. He doesn't need a network. He's just he's trying to find talent. Sure. And he's trying to grow talent. And that's why he was on the board and pushing the talent initiatives. And I was, you know, running around going, okay, I'm a sponge, you know. We did a lot of work, and we're up to 150 members now.
That's great. That's great. And you told me too that you know, we hear in all the business books, right? Work on the business, not just in the business.
Yeah.
And you've really attributed a lot of your own personal knowledge and corporate success to the fact that you've been out and getting to know all these people and learning and sponging up all the info. But these relationships have really helped you build the business.
Yeah, they certainly have. We have, you know, I have some contractors as consultants that I've ran into that help with information about what's going on in the aerospace industry. I call one of my consultants in every once in a while because I'm like, man, we have a real problem here, and I think we're really, we're not on the right track. Or I think we're on the track, but can you come in here and smell? And most often they were like, yep, Jeff, that's aerospace industry for you. High overhead, lots of risk, and you need your margin. You need your high margin. And I'm like, okay, thank you. And just those little moments are like, oh, all right, I feel confident with what we're doing now. And when you feel confident, that's when you excel. So, you know, getting to meet and learn from these other stakeholders that have been in the business aerospace for 40 years, you know, maybe they're retiring soon. You know, it's been very helpful. Yeah.
And any thoughts of becoming a pilot or anything yourself, or have you already done that?
No, you know what? I have ran out of gas a couple times on the highway.
Okay.
And I'm kind of thinking that, you know, I would be like, okay, we're in the air, and I'm like, did I check that flap? You know, my head's spinning too much.
Yeah.
I'd rather just find another personality to fly me around
somebody who's better at check boxes.
Yeah. Checking boxes and following all the rules.
Making sure the gas tank's filled.
Yeah, it was so funny. I had a funny story. So I was Gulfstream had called, and they were upset about something early on. And so I had to go into the plant on a Saturday morning. And frustrating. I had things to do with the family and all this other stuff going on. And you know what? I'm a man of my word. I'm going to go take care of this thing. So that's how I live my life. And I get in the car and I drive down there to the plant. I fix what I needed to fix, get them the data they need, and I take off. And I'm in the car and I'm still upset. And I'm on 696. And the truck just runs out of gas. It was a 2013 Silverado. So it wasn't like, you know, ringing at you, or pinging your phone. And, you know, I'm down in the tunnel. And so I get out of the car and I thought, gosh, I wonder if I have the gas can. Well, I didn't. Yes, I had the gas can for my lawnmower in the back of the truck, and it was empty. I meant to get gas in it. Kind of wished I'd gotten gas in it. So I'm walking down the highway, and just zoom, 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 cars going by, and all of a sudden this truck pulls over in front of me. And I'm probably a quarter mile from my own truck. And he backs up a little bit, and I'm like, oh, man, this guy's going to give me a ride. So I kind of run up there, and you could barely hear. He rolled his window down, and I could barely hear him.
Because it's 696.
Yeah, and we're in this tunnel. It's like the walls are 50 feet high. And he looks at me, and he's like, and I thought, oh, he's playing it safe. He's pointing to the back of the bed. And so I jump up in the back of the bed of the truck, and it's a construction guy's truck. And it's just full of, like, hammers and wood and old tire, and I'm like cleaning a spot off, and I'm going to sit in the center of this spare tire that's sitting back there, and I put the can in there, and I sit down, and I look at him through the back window. I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to ride, right? So anyways, he stops, and he gets out of the truck. He's like, no, I meant the gas can.
There's a gas can in the back of his car, or he wanted you to put the gas can in there?
Yeah, my gas can in the back of his truck.
Fill it up.
So nonetheless, this guy's still friends with me on Facebook, and we still laugh about stuff together on Facebook. I don't call the guy.
This is great.
But I'm sitting in the passenger seat now, right? And the gas can's in the back, and we're driving. And he took me to the gas station, and I said, "Well, what do you do for a living?" He's like, "Well, I'm Nicole Curtis's construction guy."
Oh,
And
how funny.
She's the HGTV,
Yep.
fix it up
Yep.
girl. And so
I can't remember the name of her show. It's not like
yeah.
Fix or Flip or something.
yeah,
That's,
something like that.
yeah.
And we both got a good laugh out of
That's great.
the idea that I was like, well, I guess he's playing it safe,
That's funny. Well, pretty apropos. My wife called me right before we sat down to do this and said, I just need to be on the phone with you because I'm picking up somebody on the side of the road who ran out of gas.
Yeah. So back to your question, though, I don't think flying a plane is in my DNA.
I think that's a good idea.
I'll sit in the back
of the pickup truck or the plane.
Yeah.
Either one.
Good point.
Yeah. So you probably have no problem flying economy class then if you're willing to sit in the back of the pickup
No,
truck.
yeah, and every once in a while, we do get a ride on a business jet. It's cool.
It's pretty neat.
It's nice. The Gulfstream came and picked us up one day, and the pilots come through the signature, station or what we're, the place where you pull up and they wash your car, and you sit in a nice lobby, and the guys are like, "Hey, have you heard of Buddy's Pizza?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we've got Buddy. We heard it's the best pizza. Do you mind if we wait 10 minutes until we just ordered a pizza?" I'm like, "No, that's no problem." So next thing you know, I'm eating Buddy's Pizza in
a private jet?
In a private jet flying to Florida.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I did think it was funny. You told me that of the people that work at Gulfstream, only 5% have ever...
Yeah,
was something like that?
It's some crazy number.
Low number that have actually flown in a Gulfstream jet?
Yeah, and it is an interesting market because, we say we diversified in aerospace. Then you say, well, you diversified as an OEM in aerospace, but you're also diversified in who's buying your products, high net worths from around the world.
Sure.
So it's a very unique diversification, and it's very interesting to learn. These are social missions. It's like, it's a mission just like, Lockheed has to put together for, the Air Force. Mm-hmm. Well, obviously that's for security, and we all think that, that's really important, and it is. It's far more important than a social mission. But at the end of the day, these people are paying money for a social mission.
Right.
And, it's, so, they're the end customer, and they'll squawk. And, you'll go fix it.
Well, and like you had said, putting yourself in the mindset of that customer is imperative because, and you'd given an example of the ice cream.
Yeah.
The ice cream on the flights.
Yeah, I've been looking at open issues lists on different, for different aircraft. It doesn't matter. You can get on and see what these issues are. But yeah, there's scenarios where the ice cream was too hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that even though that might not be an issue to you or to those 95% of employees at Gulfstream, the clientele that they're serving, that's what's important to them.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like I shared with you the mission at Oxium is our mission is to help other people accomplish their mission through technology. So we're here to serve whatever the mission is that you're trying to do, and that's what you said is, these are clients. This is a social mission. It might not resonate fully with you, not you particular, but that Gulfstream employee or anybody in the supply chain, but that's who the end client is, and what the end client wants is what we're serving.
And for the record, I don't like hard ice cream either. I mean, you put
I don't either.
Your spoon in it. It's like, wait a minute, you want it nice and a little bit.
There's a Dairy Queen right at the end of my street.
Soft
so
serve.
they've got it all figured out.
Yeah.
Well, great. This has been a great time.
Cool.
I've been a good
real
time appreciated you being here.
Yeah. Well, thanks for interviewing me, and I appreciate it.
You got it.
And the AeroOne conference, September 4th through 6th at the Royal Park Hotel. We're bringing it to Rochester, Michigan, which is super unique. We're bringing it from major metropolitan area to small town Rochester.
Love it.
For the state of Michigan.
Love it.
So
great work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.